What is your why? Do you want dynamic growth? Do you feel stuck? It's time to fix your why.
Welcome to the Fix Your Why podcast. I'm Billy Ryan. Today we're going to be talking about life doing. What does that mean? Well, it means the difference between your work life and the life we live. A lot of people, if you ask them how many hours they spend a week working, they'd probably reflexively say too many hours. I happen to do the math on what that looked like. And it surprised me. When I was writing my book, I wanted to estimate the difference between how many hours I spent working and how many hours I spent living. And I attributed sleep to the living part of my life. But as you can see on the screen, what the work week, the weekend, and your total week looks like, I was surprised to learn that I spent more time living my life than working on a typical, what a lot of people would describe as a typical work week. As I say, that surprised me, got my attention. In writing a book, at least in my experience, as I would write, I'd try to attribute certain thoughts that I had to the person who created those thoughts. And one of them is, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. Hence the kind of life doing thing. It actually has been attributed to both Confucius, who lived 551 BC, and Mark Twain, who was born in 1835. You can select whomever you want to select as the person who coined that phrase. But I think we understand the concept. It's the importance of loving what we do being basically our work life. In my period of high achievement, the story that I tell in my book, Fix Your Why, I loved what I was doing. I worked my ass off, but I loved it. And I pulled all-nighters. I took red-eye flights. There's all kinds of craziness that accompanied my doing, but I knew I was doing something significant. I knew I was making a difference in my family's life, in my life, in the industry that I was in, and that was exciting. The idea of significance versus success. Success we usually measure in the amount of money we make, the cars we drive, the size of the home that we're living in, and there's nothing wrong with any of those measures. I'm not one to judge others on what they consider success. Significance to me is a little bit different. It's not completely detached from the stuff in our lives, but people driven to make a difference in the world are usually driven by significance. The knowledge that the work we're doing matters. And hence there's a level of inspiration involved in that doing. I also believe that the journey is more important than the destination, because the journey is the present moment. It's what we're doing. It's the choices we're making in the moment that make the difference. I was interviewing one of the guests in my podcast, and she talked about being perfect and how wanting to be perfect sometimes prevented her from doing anything. And I think we're all familiar with being in that place when what we're dreaming about doing, that life of significance, that we dare to dream about that life of significance, that it can be so daunting that we don't know how to take the first step. And we're paralyzed by that perfection. Some days we have to do in the realization that maybe we're not as inspired, we're not as motivated, our energy might be low. But in the words of my grandfather, we just have to soldier on. Because not every day is going to be a wonderful day. We're going to meet challenges, we're going to disappoint others, whether it's a team member, whether it's a loved one. It happens. As Forrest Gump says, it happens. Life happens. And it's okay. You've got to give yourself grace to have a bad day. Don't stay focused there. Don't get stuck there. That baggage of past performance, we don't have to carry it into the next day. Just give yourself grace. A new day gives you new opportunity to achieve at a high level. There's a realization that the work that we do, that there are sometimes tasks that don't motivate us or elevate us, but they're necessary to accomplishing a task or getting our work done. As you've heard in previous episodes, I always was focused on important and urgent. And I like to spend most of my time on the important that is not urgent, because that's where I think the magic happens. Sometimes it's difficult to differentiate those four quadrants: what's urgent, what's important, what's not important. And again, life's a practice. Life's an iteration. With practice, we get better at whatever it is we're doing. If we think about life more as a practice, then we can grow with each experience. And the life doing is seen more as your classroom or your laboratory. It's a place where maybe you have days where the doing is easy and the energy is high. If you've played sports, they talk about being in the zone. When you're in the zone, you're not thinking about what you're doing. It's coming naturally. I was speaking to a group recently, and we were talking about significance and best and achievement. And I was asked, how do you know if you're on the right path? If the innovating or creating that you're doing is on the right path? And one of the insights, and it's why I love the experience of interviewing people and speaking to groups, because I always learn something. And what this question brought into form for me is the uncomfortableness of high achievement. When you're a market leader, you set the bar for what greatness and achievement looks like. And that's a place of not knowing. And sometimes, we get caught wanting to control, wanting to be perfect, as we just talked about. But we have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable when we're achieving at a high level. Think about being on a high dive. For those of you that have had that experience, the difference between being on the low dive versus the high dive, you definitely have a greater sense of gravity. You feel that vulnerability of being out on this board that's moving and there's no rail on either side when you're on the end of that board. That gravity, that feeling is what is palpable when you're a leader, when you're innovating. So if you're a creative, that's trying to do something that's not been done before, if you have that feeling of discomfort, you have to welcome that. I remember when I played basketball in high school and I would get butterflies. My freshman year, I barely made the team. And by my senior year, I was MVP and high score. It was a great 4 years of achievement for me. I worked hard and I just worked my way up. And finally, by my senior year, I was starting every game. And I remember being nervous the first couple of games. And then by that third game, those butterflies started to signal to me that something good was about to happen. Because the first couple of games, I played well. And so in my life, I began to welcome the butterflies because it was a sign that my body was getting ready to achieve. And I started to feel that in my work life. And again, welcoming that discomfort. I've always been a risk taker, and I have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs, and it's one of the reasons for this podcast is to help people who are trying to live a life of significance. I hope you learn from my experiences and the lessons that I've learned. I hope I can impart something to you that helps you avoid some of the bumps in the road that I faced. Become comfortable with the uncomfortable. It means you're on the right path. It means that your why is fixed on the right destination. I'm Billy Ryan, and this is the Fix Your Why podcast. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.